Topic 1.6 from Unit 1, change of power and authority. Okay, so we talked about sources of power and authority. Now we're going to talk about the change of power and authority. Again, this is educational purposes only and mirroring the AP Comparative Government and Politics curriculum. After this topic, you are going to be able to explain the difference between how authoritarian and democratic regimes use power to maintain sovereignty. Contrast the characteristics of a change in regime versus a change in government. Describe a change of regime by coup, provide an example, and describe a change of regime by revolution and provide an example. Regimes use power differently. So you're going to use power differently if you're an authoritarian or a democratic regime in order to support the sovereignty or the authority of a state to govern itself, right? So in a democratic regime, UK, Mexico, they're going to use elections as linkage institutions to encourage citizen participation. Hopefully those elections are going to be free, fair, and competitive. If you're like, oh my gosh, this is so redundant, topic after topic after topic, it is such a key concept before we move on to any of the other units that you need to make sure that you understand this clearly. You're going to have a limited military role in policymaking. You're going to use less of force and coercion and power to maintain sovereignty, and you're going to rely more on the consent of the governed. Authoritarian, you're going to resist citizen participation. If you do have participation by the citizens, it's not true. It's rigged. Okay. It's a farce. It's a mirage to make the people think that they have a say so they don't revolt. Right. Military plays an important role in policymaking and helps maintain sovereignty. And they're going to use more force, coercion, and power to maintain sovereignty. And eventually, human nature will lead citizens to push for a change in the regime. Eventually, I'm not making any predictions for any of the countries that we study. All right, so let's talk about what it looks like when you have a change in regime versus a change in government. And a change in regime is a change from authoritarian to democratic or democratic to authoritarian, because you can see the opposite. We kind of see that in Russia, where they had a liberal democracy and they have slid down that democratic mountain all the way back into the cesspool of authoritarianism. All right. But I'm going to use Mexico again. God knows, I hope you have to write an FRQ about Mexico and the 2000 election, because I feel like I've mentioned it 3 times. So hopefully we're starting to let that sink in. But a change in regime is when rules and the institutions are replaced. The actual political system and the way it operates changes. So it's like taking a computer and taking out the Mac operating system and putting another operating system in the computer. Okay, so I don't know if you could do that. I teach government. I don't teach computer science. Okay, so we saw when PRI was a party that dominated Mexican elections for decades. And in 2000, Vicente Fox, the PAN party, won. And there's more coalitions of parties in Mexico today, but these were the 3 main ones. The PRD, PAN, and the PRI. All right, a change in government is just when the people in control of the political system change. So we saw that, let's see, today is the 22nd in the United States. We saw Joe Biden be inaugurated last Wednesday, like 2 days ago. Okay, that's a change in government from Trump to Biden. Okay, it's just a new person is elected and a new person takes over the government, but the regime is still in place. And this is going to happen more often. Change in government is going to happen way more often than a change in regime. And so an example would be prime ministers in the UK changing from Theresa May to Boris Johnson. Prime ministers have a cabinet. It's like just like our United States president has a cabinet. That cabinet is made up of ministers that the prime minister gets to choose to help them run the government, the parliament. And hey, IKEA, I need a new cabinet. That would be a change in government. Oh my God. Sorry about that. And hey, look, changes in government can be peaceful and they can be violent. We saw how a change in government went violent on January 6, 2021 in the United States. So let's talk about regime changes, though. So there could be a coup. Coups are forceful takeovers of power. Usually, there's force or threat of force. It's generally a temporary change, often led by elites, often military elites. Nigeria is going to be that country that we study that is going to be full of coups before the Constitution of 1999. Um, and actually, the current president of Nigeria, Buhari, led one of those coups and was installed as the leader of Nigeria during one of those coups, but has come back and said he embraces the idea of free and fair elections and democracy. At least he says that. Revolutions, they're going to be a removal and replacement of government, usually involves the masses in protest movements. Revolutions don't necessarily mean a regime change, but a lot of times in revolutions, you're moving from one authoritarian ruler to another authoritarian ruler, so it's not really a regime change. It's more like a government change, but not necessarily. They can't look. Revolutions can be violent or they can be peaceful. Like the UK, this was a regime change that was caused by a revolution. When the United States got rid of British colonial rule, that was a revolution that resulted in a regime change. Okay, so the UK had the Glorious Revolution in 1688, where we saw the overthrow of King James II, and it was replaced by Queen Mary. And Queen Mary and like William and Mary, William of Orange, Queen Mary, William and Mary, which the college is named after him, gave or handed over more power to the parliament. So it was a transitioning into a democracy revolution that did change the regime. So Russia, 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution, installing a communist regime. Communist Revolution led by Mao Zedong in China, 1949. And Iran. Iran is one of those situations where you got rid of a Shah, which was a king, a dictator, and replaced him with an authoritarian ruler, the Ayatollah Khomeini, who is just as authoritarian, but in a different way than the Shah was. And that is it.